Yes, okay. Well, I'm gonna start. Buenos días todo el mundo. Estoy muy contenta de estar con ustedes, and that's about it for my Spanish. I'm very sorry. This is not my strength. Thank you all. Thank you, Dean Udolphin, and your team. It's a great pleasure. And so on behalf of HSC Montreal, I would like to wish all of you a very happy anniversary. So my talk this morning is going to be about solving or trying to solve, in fact, the digital transformation puzzle. So I've been with HSC Montreal for about a decade. And I've been engaged in research, teaching, and transfer activities that mostly relate to three streams. Consumer behavior in the context of e-commerce, the design of interactive interfaces to improve user experiences, and the responsible adoption and diffusion of digital innovations in the context of digital transformation. So that's who I am in brief. And I would really love to know who is with us today. So who is in the audience? So we've set up a little tool for you to use, whether you're online or in the room. And for that, you can either use your cell phone and scan the QR code that you see on the screen, or go to menti.com and use the code 39687398, the code that appears on the screen. So you can connect. I have little hearts coming in. Okay, I think people are connecting. There will be 3 times during the presentation where you will, be asked to participate in a poll. So this is the first question for you. Who are you? Who's in the audience? Are you a student, an alumni, entrepreneur? Who is out there? I'll leave you a few seconds to connect and to answer the poll. Lots of students. So we have students, faculty member, administrators, alumni, entrepreneur, a few other stakeholders of the universities, and a few curious visitors. All right, that's awesome. That gives us a good idea of the proportion of people. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome. And so getting to the core of today's presentation, digital transformation and future trends. My intent will be to provide you with a framework, okay, to help you think about digital transformation as clearly and efficiently as possible. And the rationale for this strategy is that it's always very tricky to talk about future trends, especially in technology, and especially when you're an academic, because there's a lot of speculation and we just, we don't know the future. So in trying to making sense of current and future trends, what we need, or I will argue, is a solid framework that can be generic and broad enough, and can be used in a variety of circumstances, different technologies, different industries, and can work across time. So with that objective in mind, I will take you through 4 main steps. First, we need to scope the phenomenon, and so I'll review the key components that help us define digital transformation. And second, we will assemble the main pieces of the puzzle, as I like to call them. And in other words, we'll organize all the components in a framework. And third, I will illustrate how to use the framework to analyze a particular episode of transformation in the media industry. And finally, looking ahead, I'll consider digital transformation against the backdrop of 3 important realizations. So let's get started. What do we know about digital transformation? Well, the first question to ask is when? When did we start talking about it? It was not part of the rhetoric 15 years ago or even 10 years ago. So when did that change in narrative occur? One way to find out is to do something we all do on an everyday basis, is we ask Google. And so here we ask Google Trends in particular. And what you see in this graph is an evolution of interest in the search term digital transformation over time. So the interest is measured by the volume of queries, okay, about digital transformation that were received worldwide by the Google search engine. The numbers on the y-axis represent search interest relative to the highest point on the chart, which happens to be today, actually, or this year. So overall, Google Trends tell us that digital transformation, yes, is at the peak of its popularity today, and that it started to be used as a popular search term around 2014, 15, 16, in those years. And this insight is supported when we look at, what the big consulting firms, industry associations, and the like have published about digital transformation. The MIT Film Management Review, as you may know, has been a strong leader in providing the business community with industry examples and reflections about digital transformation. And they even had an article you can see here on the left in 2003 about it. But mostly, really, it really emerged strongly more in 2014, 15. So other key players started to publish content on it. Harvard Business Review, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte, ADL, and the World Economic Forum. You can see here on the right had an interesting article in 2016. They presented digital transformation in the context of a global, what they call fourth industrial revolution. So a profound socio-economic revolution that was going beyond the third, the computerization revolution that we saw after the Second World War. At HEC, we followed the change in narrative and around the same time, and we created and we taught the first class, a master level class on digital transformation in the fall of 2015. And at the time, we used as a foundation, to structure the course, the overarching framework that Capgemini and the MIT Center for Digital Business had crafted, and you can see on the right. So the structure and content of our course evolved a little bit, marginally, I would say, until there was some serious conceptual work that started to be published. And an example of that is one of my colleagues, Grégory Vial's work in 2019, which produced a really in-depth analysis of how the phenomenon has been defined until then. And this work, that included a review of 282 articles, peer-reviewed scientific and industry-oriented articles, highlighted that there are a few definitions that have been provided by authors, and there was no clear agreement on these definitions. In other words, that revealed a lack of maturity and a lack of consensus of the community interested in the phenomenon. So let me take you through some of the definitions so that we can start identifying the key ingredients of digital transformation. So Westerman and colleagues in 2014 argued that digital transformation is the use of technology to radically improve performance or reach of enterprises. It's a rather concise definition, that identifies tech as the key ingredient of change, that specifies enterprises as the focal point of transformation. And, interestingly, it kind of emphasizes the dramatic scale of the change. They talk about radical improvement. So that's one definition. A more recent definition in 2021 also highlight the scale of changes. Here the authors talk about a redefinition, and it goes beyond somehow by proposing that the changes that are associated with digital transformation target the core of organizations, their value proposition, very core, and even more core, their identity. That was an interesting definition. And the last one I would like to share with you is one we proposed together with my colleagues in 2017. And we defined digital transformation as an ongoing process of leveraging the accelerating power of fast evolving products, processes, capabilities, a business model, in order to meet the changing set of customer expectations and to cope with an increasingly fast changing, IT-dependent and globally scaled competitive environment. Okay, not very concise. We admit, I guess no definition is perfect, The interesting part, what I want to highlight here, is that we propose adding a new ingredient somehow that's highlighted in orange on the slide, and it relates to the importance of context of change and reflects the idea that all the radical IT-enabled transformation that organizations go through happen in a changing context that's really, really important to consider. And that includes changes in customer expectations and changes in the broader competitive environments into which organizations operate. So all in all, the existing knowledge tells us that there are some key ingredients to digital transformation: technological progress and the emergence of new capabilities. Second, the leveraging of these capabilities by innovators. Third, the adoption and diffusion of digital innovations by consumers and organizations as well. And of course, the organizational transformation that are put in place to cope with the potentially destructive dynamics in competitive environments. So that's the first thing. And in addition, we also learned that digital technologies have kind of two distinct roles. One is the role of a trigger of transformation, and another is an enabler of the changes that are associated with digital transformation. So let's move now that we have the foundations together. We can move on to the second step in our journey, and I want to take you through a model that hopefully could help us, think systematically about digital transformation and could be applicable as broadly as possible. Again, that's really the core intent here. So how do we build such model? The method we used, to build the model that we'll call the canvas, is borrowed from design theory, and it's used in the generation of what is called visual inquiry tools. Now, I'm sure most of you know at least one of such visual inquiry tools, the business model canvas. It's very highly used in business school and in business training in general to help students and execs think about and communicate in a very structured fashion about about what a particular business is about. It's structured, but it's also very flexible in the use. So, example, in the canvas, you can ask it induces you to ask questions about what's your value proposition as a business, which segments does it serve, what are the revenue streams that are generated, what activities support the value proposition, and what are the key cost centers associated with those activities, all those questions. So that's an example of a very, very popular visual inquiry tool. And tools like the business model Canva, they are very popular because they are useful in providing a common vocabulary and helping teams collaborate and align on the essential. And so to build one, design theory tells us that the first thing to do is to build a conceptual model, kind of an ontology, of what it is that you want to model. And so that's what we did. And so in the last years, together with our students, we have engaged in an effort to help develop such a foundational conceptual model. We went through several iterations. You can see here one on the screen, one of the first one actually, in which we aim to highlight really what's happening inside a particular organization in terms of digital transformation. So those are the blue boxes. From what's happening outside an organization, what's in red, so the dynamics of digital transformation outside, and of course the relations between all the different parts. That was one iteration, and this is another one. This is the most recent one, the most recent underlying conceptual model for digital transformation that we built based on our definition, but the iterative definition of digital transformation. So it's much more concise, organized around 5 core dimensions that relate to each other, and I'll take you through them. And so this model has led to this canvas. Now, although a canvas such as this one is rather static, is a static representation, because the links between the parts are hidden. But it's very important to notice that it really supports the analysis of 2 overarching dynamics. And the first dynamic you see here with the arrows in red is the one highlighting the idea that technological progress can be a source of industry disruptions through or because of innovation and adoption dynamics. And so these dynamics, can trigger, accelerate, or mitigate the extent and scale of disruptions. That's why they are in between. They are very important mechanisms. Disruptions do not just happen with technological progress. We need the digital innovations and we need their diffusion in a targeted population. So that's the first important dynamic behind the model. And the second one is that of incumbent organization in an industry who are responding to disruption by reconfiguring their activities, their resources, their processes that are involved in value creation. Okay, and those incumbent organizations responding to disruption, they also leverage the dynamics of technological progress, digital innovation, and technology adoption to operate, to execute their reconfigurations. So how concretely do we use the canvas? The short answer, as always, is that it depends. And, in other words, you will choose to conduct your analysis of digital transformation in a way that's driven by your goal. And the canvas is aimed to enable such flexibility. So let me explain. If you are using the canvas from the perspective of a traditional organization, looking for ways to adjust to new consumer expectation and new usage of the technology, you may want to start by conducting a very in-depth analysis of disruption dynamics in the industry. If you already have a fairly good idea of such dynamics, then you're probably ready to build on this knowledge to craft the reconfiguration strategy. If you're a technology entrepreneur, see there were entrepreneurs in the room. Well, if you're a technology entrepreneur, trying to figure out how to create value with a new digital product, and you want to penetrate the most desirable industry segments for that digital product, well, you may want to focus first on the ties between innovation, adoption, and disruption. And if you are a technology firm, striving to induce or trigger desired adoption behaviors, well, then you'll benefit from examining the ties between progress, technological progress, innovation, and adoption. So it really depends on the perspective. Where you start depends on the perspective that you are in. And irrespective of that, of why and where to start, let me now illustrate some questions that might structure your analysis across the 5 components. And I want to start with technological progress. Here it's important to distinguish 2 levels of analysis. Further, the foundation. So the foundation level is about the core elements of the digital infrastructure. And here I refer to the network, the algorithms, processing and storage, and interfaces. And in all these areas, there have been tremendous progress in the last decade, and improvements continue. Think of machine learning algorithms, mobile virtual interfaces, 5G for networks, the constant doubling of processing power every 18 months for CPU. So those are the foundations, okay? The digital infrastructure, the core motors of technological progress. The second level is that of capabilities. And it should lead you to examine what the progress in the core infrastructure affords. So in other words, what business value can it create? What business value can 5G or can machine algorithms create? So one capability you might be interested in, as an example, I refer to as simplification. Cloud computing can be seen as a simplified way to access computational resources in a way that easily adapts to your changing demands, changing demands for CPU power, for storage capacity, and so on. So that's an example. Another one is automation. Progress in algorithms, interfaces have been very, very instrumental in supporting lightweight automation. For example, robotic process automation and what we call low-code or no-code workflow automation in general. Such technologies enable cheaper and more efficient ways to deploy solutions to automate routine business workflows. For example, managing the information flow, that is associated with product returns in e-commerce. Very, very applicable for lightweight automation. There is also intermediation. Platforms that support on-demand transactions could absolutely not have been successful or even function without the massive progress in storage capacity, network improvements, and progress also in mobile and touchscreen interfaces. As a final example, think of prediction. It is a major capability that has emerged from progress in algorithms and computing storage and power. Better prediction enables smart automation, objects and voice recognition, natural language processing, more accurate forecasts. And, at the end, it's just more efficient allocation of resources for a business. And so all those derived capabilities, businesses have a very strong appetite for them. Now, those are examples, okay? So simplification, automation, intermediation, prediction, those are just the terms I give to those new capabilities that result from technological progress. And they can be exploited by digital innovators, as I will discuss next. But at a broader level, I think we all agree that it's interesting to know that they all lead to data, okay? And data as the new oil of the digital revolution. So in other words, it should be a priority that, the examination of technological progress include an analysis of the data, I call them the data-related affordances that are derived from the progress in our digital infrastructures. Okay, it's poll time, everyone. So I invite you to go back to menti.com, use the code 39687398, and I would like to ask you a very open question. I'd like to have your opinion on what you think is the technology that has the most potential to change the world, for better or for worse. And it could be technologies that I cited, or other ones. I haven't talked about many like blockchain, quantum computing, you name it. So, it's a chance for you to tell us, to tell the audience, what is it that you think will potentially change our world? All right, let's see. I'll leave you a few more seconds. Okay. Okay, you now should be able to see. So we have AI, cloud computing, RPA, blockchain, robotica, redes sociales, metaverse, social media, blockchain, cloud computing, robots, crypto, biomedicine, yeah. Artificial intelligence is quite popular. The use of robots, it has already started quite a bit. Algorithms, AI is a popular one, it seems. It depends on several factors and in what we'll use. But in a short key, I think it's better for business. It depends on several factors. It depends. You're similar to me. Always use it depends. Metaverso, medical technology, blockchain, AI, nanotech. Yes, nanotech is an emerging technology that has potential. Intermediation, blockchain, sustainable development, metaverse. Nice. Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate it. All right, we'll go back to the presentation now. Thank you for sharing. How do I go back? Maybe here. All right. So, continuing our coverage of the canvas, let's move to the digital innovation component. If you want to exploit, the technological progress we just discussed, and if you want to be a digital innovator, you can think of three key targets for that innovation. process innovation involves new ways of doing things. For example, you may want to develop a new approach to automate advertising placement or a new way to manage inventory more accurately, for example. Product-focused innovation involves the development of new digital products, chatbot, a smart speaker, product that has a strong IT component, let's say. And finally, business model innovation. And this one, it goes beyond process and product innovation. It often includes them, but it goes beyond by proposing really new means of value creation and capture through IT. Google AdWords in ad placement is a good one. Car2Go in car sharing, Uber in on-demand transportation. They're a good example of that kind of digital innovation. Now, at the heart of our canvas is adoption. And adoption captures the extent and the pace at which digital innovation is becoming used. It's at the heart of the digital transformation dynamics because it can accelerate or slow them down. And it's why it's positioned in the middle, actually, in the model. It's the component that's the most tightly related to the four others. That's why it is in the middle. And for a lot of digital innovation, the extent and the speed of adoption is enormously important, especially for advertising-based models that rely on large volumes of data to help advertiser better target content. And so in that regard, the evidence of the past decades indicates that digital innovation diffuses at much faster pace than previous innovation. For example, you can see here that it took about 50 years for about 40 million American households to use the telephone. And it was a product that had very strong network effects. It took the radio a little less time to be adopted by just 50 million people. Now look at Facebook figures. First year of operation, 6 million users, 2 billion and counting today, after about 15 years of operation. Tremendous growth. So when you examine adoption dynamics for your own organization, your own enterprise, look at factors that may influence pace. Here are some examples of factors that have accelerated adoption of several mobile-based digital platforms in the last decade. Think of Uber, Facebook. And so ask yourself, are there other factors that are likely to accelerate or, on the contrary, slow down adoption of a particular digital innovation that would be relevant in your context? So, of course, this thinking would involve the larger context, including the political, economic, and regulatory factors will need to be accounted in your analysis. And for example, the COVID-19 pandemic has been, an unexpected accelerator of technological adoption, by organizations and also by individuals, consumers and learners in many ways. Another disruption part of the canvas invites a more industry level of analysis. And in short, it's a focus on asking, are you at risk of becoming obsolete, or can you benefit from making other competitors obsolete? And so to answer this question, it's important to keep an eye on the key markers of performance in an industry and see how they evolve or how they have evolved. So look at the written press, for example. Advertising revenues, is or perhaps was a key marker of business health for traditional media companies. Well, they fell by 70% in the US in just one decade. Look at the music industry and the global sales KPI. They were almost cut in half in 15 years. Now, retail has not been spared. Malls, shopping centers, they have been growing and growing for years in the US since the Second World War. And well, in 10 years, between 2005 and 2015, 20% of them shut down. And it's not over, especially with COVID and, the surge of e-commerce. So the leading question for a user of the canvas here should include what industry you're in, what's its structure, what are its dynamics, And how are those dynamics evolving? Are they mergers, acquisitions? Are they new tech disruptors trying to get in to penetrate the market? Where's the power moving? And answering these questions will help you develop a sharp idea of the competitive environment and its vulnerability somehow to digital disruptions. So we're reaching the last component, reconfiguration. And at this step in the analysis, the focus shifts inward. So you have to ponder about the nature first of your strategic response, given the insights you've gained from examining outside trends, threats, opportunities, and you have to ask yourself, what's your plan in this context? When you've laid out a strategic vision, you need to think about the supporting role of digital technology. How will you innovate, or how will you leverage digital innovations, to accomplish your strategic vision? Then perhaps, and very likely, because of your strategic intent and because of the new place that you will probably give to digital innovation, well, part of your business model will need to be revised. Okay, so here you are invited to use the business model canvas to think about this and to think about you will transition from your previous business model to your new business model. And ultimately, you will have to make decisions about all the nitty-gritty, the micro-level, time-consuming, costly changes in work routines and processes and capabilities and the culture, all that will need to be changed, to support the vision, to make your vision, your new vision possible. Okay, and that's a lot of where the difficulty is. All right, the step of organizational changes. Okay, so let's put the tool into practice. Okay, and for that, I'd like to discuss the case of La Presse. La Presse is a francophone daily newspaper that was founded in Montreal in 1884. And like most popular daily newspapers, La Presse benefited from many years of growth and prosperity, benefiting among others from improved literacy in the population, progress in printing technology, improved infrastructure for transportation, and all that. But like any daily newspaper, it has also faced major turmoil in the last few decades in the context of the digital revolution. So let me use the canvas to go through La Presse's story, okay, and the situation and how it developed digital initiatives in the early 2010 to face this situation. But first, last poll of the morning for us, I would like to ask you kind of a tricky question. What did La Presse become well known for in 2016? You can go back to menti.com, put your code, and it's not an easy question. It's kind of a trivia question. The readership of La Presse is rather local. It's in Quebec. It's a francophone newspaper, but its case was really talked about quite a bit in the general media. So if you're interested by the media industry, you may be able to answer this question. So let's see what we have. So did La Presse switch to 100% digital on weekdays? Did it switch to 100% online subscription model? Did it switch to 100% government ownership model? Or did it switch to 100% digital on weekends? It seems that the subscription model is popular. I'll give you a few more seconds to participate. Growing in popularity, the subscription model. All right. It is stabilizing, so we can move to the answer. And the correct answer is not the subscription model. La Presse became well known in 2016 because it became the first newspaper in the world to switch to 100% digital on weekdays. At the time, the weekend edition would remain in print, but it was also terminated 2 years later in 2018. So let me tell you the story. And for that, let's go back in time, and start by analyzing the disruption component and look what's been happening in the industry over the years. So you can look at movements, as I said earlier, mergers, acquisition, bankrupt, etc. And we'll go back to it. But like a more straightforward first step is to analyze industry KPI. And on that matter, advertising, has historically been the industry main revenue and profit driver. Paid circulation, has been non-negligible at all, but in fact, it mostly served to defray the cost, the heavy cost of creating and distributing the physical product. So for La Presse, for example, before 2010, advertising revenues accounted for about 65% of their revenue. Let's look at a few graphs on KPI. Here we look at a 60-year evolution of paid circulation of all Canadian dailies. Okay, and what we see is that it was equivalent, that circulation, that paid circulation, to more than 100% of households in the 1950s. And then by 2010, it was about 30%. So it's interesting because, the newspaper stopped following population growth a long time ago, So looking at this particular metric, we see sign of a problematic situation, and that started way back in time, way back before we started talking about the digital revolution. However, the most dramatic metric that led experts to argue that the print newspaper business would be absolutely dead by 2025 is that of advertising revenues. Of course, you see the steep decline that started early 2000. Of course, the 2008 financial crisis did not help and contributed further to more decline in advertising revenues. So there were evident signs of disruption in this industry, and they coincided with the arrival of new entrants in the content sphere, mostly in the form of pure players, so internet companies that operate exclusively online, so they don't bear the cost of printing, they don't bear the cost of transportation, some even aggregate contents from other news outlets. And they were becoming increasingly popular with younger people. But also, and probably much more importantly, there was the growth of new advertising giants, also known as Google and Facebook. And they started monopolizing the advertising budgets, as you can see here on the screen. In fact, the most recent figures indicate that those two competitors get about 50% of the pie of worldwide digital ad spending. Okay, I think it switched to even more than 50% in 2021. So although, most major publishers like La Presse, they had developed online offerings. And with that, they had created new digital ad revenue streams, but those revenue streams have not been able to compensate for the exponential growth of the digital giants, together with the decline in print circulation. So that led to a pretty dire situation. And the conclusion here is that yes, all signs were leading to the blinking of disruptions warning since the early 2000s. Now, very closely related to the examination of disruption, the adoption and innovation components would invite a more thorough investigation of the why of disruption. And in the media industry, that would lead to an analysis of the new business models of Google and Facebook ads. How do their value propositions differ from that of traditional news player? And what is required on the back end of the business model somehow to deliver such value proposition that is so desirable to advertiser? And I'm thinking here of, ads targeting and ads tracking, ads performance tracking. So here, this would lead to identify network effect also as a key accelerating factors in the adoption of this innovation. So moving our attention to tech progress, we can isolate important technological drivers of digital transformation in the media industry. Foremost, there is the intermediation capability, that's afforded by progress in the core tech infrastructure, and that's enabling those platform-based, heavily data-centric models of Facebook ads and Google ads. And there's also prediction and automation. There are two other affordances that are very instrumental to both the existence and the power of these business model innovations of those tech giants. Now we're getting to the juicy part of the story. Having built a good understanding of the context, we can move inward and look at La Presse responses in this very concerning competitive context of the year 2000 to 2010. While top executives at La Presse, they were very well aware of the situation, but the 2008 crisis really boosted their sense of threats. And as they were working on the crafting of their strategy response, Apple announced, I think it was early 2010, the forthcoming release of a new computing device. That was the iPad. It was released in April, but it was announced in January, and there had been rumors in 2009 about this new digital device being designed by Apple. And this iPad, became the vehicle for La Presse digital strategy and the response in this episode of digital transformation. And the iPad app that was developed by La Presse was called La Presse Plus, and it was designed to revolutionize news consumption. So most newspapers, including La Presse, they had developed, as I said earlier, online presence, but it was just digitizing content, without giving much thought to the user experience. And La Presse Plus really exploited the affordances of the iPad to facilitate, a very engaging information consumption experience, in a user-friendly environment with videos and interactive media. Now, the app is very important, of course, but at the end, it was a means to execute a full reconfiguration of the business model. So many things needed to be figured out, on top of just having the tech right, the application right. And one of it is monetization strategy. Do we make readers pay for content? Big question. There were countless discussions and debates on the matter among executives, and at the end they decided that they wanted to remove as many barriers as possible to readership and support audience growth, especially with younger folks. So, they decided to offer the iPad edition free of charge, relying exclusively on advertising revenues. And in April 2013, the app was officially released, after 3 years of very intense research and development, $40 million investment, complete reorganizing of news production, the development of all the software tools to facilitate the editing and publishing of both the editorial content and the advertising content, and all the careful planning of transitioning an audience that was using a print medium to moving to the tablet medium. So was that a successful reconfiguration? That's the question that is always asked by students at the end of the case. We wrote a case on it with my colleagues, and it's actually translated into Spanish. Well, the story is still going. Okay, La Presse is still in operation. They were actually quite successful in growing the audience on the tablets. We need to acknowledge that this was fueled by a very high penetration rate of the tablets. I think tablets were adopted by more than 50% of North Americans, North American internet users in less than a decade. And, it's a speed that was never seen before in the history of digital technology. But for La Presse, bringing in the advertisers in the model and making them pay a premium to be present on this, highly contextual, engaging media, it is probably still a challenge. And it's a challenge that becomes even more salient when we have people moving to mobile, for their content consumption. And, it's obvious for us today, but it was really not obvious back in, 2009, 2010. The experience of consuming content on cell phone was, pretty bad still. So the case that we wrote with my colleagues on La Presse, it stops in early 2016, and it says nothing about mobile, but we know that since then, La Presse has heavily invested in the mobile app and in further analytics capability to enhance the value propositions to advertiser in particular. So La Presse is out of the print business. It is a tremendously successful outcome for that very intense episode of digital transformation, but the dynamics of digital transformation continue. The process is ongoing. So we're getting to the fourth and last step in our journey, and now is a good time to kind of step back and consider digital transformation against the backdrop of three important realizations. Personal, but also I think it's quite a collective realizations. And the first one can seem mundane, but I think it's really worth repeating again and again. People are the key to digital transformation. Jerry Can reminded us of that in his book. He has a book in 2019 called The Technology Fallacy. And he says digital transformation and digital disruption of companies isn't really about technology. It is more about the people and how you work differently as a result. And in that regard, there is an increased sense among many people that work is not necessarily more fulfilling when it incorporates digital innovations. For example, a phenomenon that's becoming omnipresent in organization and negatively influences productivity, well-being at work is technostress. Technostress is somehow, workers' negative responses, and they can be psychological, behavioral, even emotional. And those responses, negative responses, result from an inability to cope with technologies. Technostress is triggered in a situation of technological overload. Think of when technologies push us to work more and to work more rapidly. I think about the number of emails or any type of electronic communications that workers typically have to deal with on an everyday basis. The constant interruptions they create, the multitasking, and so on. This is also caused by technological complexity and uncertainty. It can create a feeling of exhaustion from just having to keep up constantly, updating our skills and feeling perhaps low in self-efficacy. Now, beyond technostress, there is another powerful concept when it comes to minding the people in digital transformation, and it is that of digital resilience. In short, this refers to the ability that one has to detect and address highly disruptive events that require substantial changes in how we use information technology. Think of COVID-19, as a hell of an unexpected event that pushed us to change our work routines, use new communication technologies. Think also of massive IT implementations, not unexpected, but often a source of people, losing their mind when having to incorporate new tools in their work processes. So what's interesting, I think, with digital resilience is that it's an adaptive trait. Okay, that means that organizations can help build digital resilience, by training workers, by fostering a culture of forbearance. So of course, this is very important to keep in mind when managers design and execute the reconfigurations in the context of their digital transformation. The second realization is that digital transformation, and we've seen this, is a phenomenon that goes beyond the boundaries of organizations. It is profoundly societal. And a powerful idea that came up recently, and that I think echoes particularly well this societal component of digital transformation, is algorithmic pollution. And for a quick background, algorithmic pollution is to be understood in the context of the diffusion of automated decision-making algorithms by organizations, by governments. And these algorithmic systems, they are powered by AI, analytics, big data, and they are applied in transformative services. transformative services are services that are vital for any society. Social welfare, education, employment, healthcare, criminal justice, and the like. And unfortunately, there is an important and I think very legitimate concern that this trend of constant and hyper automation through AI and the scale and efficiency at all costs, it creates a new form of social pollution, by inducing kind of unfair and discriminatory decisions that hurt families, communities, and society really at large. So this risk and others, they're creating the need for organization to be more socially responsible when it comes to their adoption and use of digital innovation. Earlier waves of IT-enabled transformation, 80s, 90s, even 2000s, they used to be very much bounded to organizations, and they did not scale as much and as fast to society at large. But nowadays, not only you as an organization or a decision maker in an organization need to be focusing on, why, when, and how I will need to adapt to digital progress, but it's important that you also think about whether your adoption decisions, and the process that will lead you to adoption decisions are socially responsible. In other words, because digital transformation dynamics are so intertwined with society, there is the absolute need to make sure that we make technology adoption decisions that demonstrate what we call foresight, transparency, and most importantly, civic-mindedness. Okay, and not be solely based on very narrow, defined economic indicators and kind of self-centered point of reference. And last but not least, because of all the dynamics I've talked about, scale and growth of digital business models, increased speed of technology adoption, well, digital transformation is not without ecological impact. And there are two main ways to think about IT and digital transformation in relation to ecological impact. The green IT academic and professional movement promotes the practice of environmentally sustainable computing. One example is designing more energy efficient hardware and data centers. Another is improving how we deal with e-waste. These all the discarded, electrical and electronic devices. E-waste is massive. It's estimated that it accounted for about 20% of all global waste in 2022. Really dramatic. And we know that e-waste disposal contributes to the climate crisis. Electronics contain, materials, a whole bunch of materials, but it includes copper, aluminum, iron, and when they are burned, these metals accumulate in the air. And in addition, e-waste disproportionately affect low-income communities and marginalized ecosystems. They're massively produced in developed countries and then are moved offshore to developing countries where little is done. A lot of it is not recycled. They are burnt or they are, left in landfills. Very unfair. And it's important to acknowledge that the e-waste crisis is linked to digital transformation because of the exponential rates of technology adoption, and in particular, the rapid growth of cell phones, smartphones. Our guilty tendency to use multiple devices and to keep them for a short period of time, and getting a new one every 12 months or so, with more powerful and desirable features. So that fuels the crisis for sure. On a more positive note, in the IT for Green avenue, there is the hope and the desire to use digital technology as a tool to help reduce greenhouse gas emission and to help mitigate the climate crisis. For example, using digital platforms and sensors to help monitor and manage energy consumption, machinery, lighting, and to always have maximum efficiency. For example, building IT to better coordinate the supply chain, reduce transportation, encourage proximity consumption. For example, building IT that enable more efficient carpooling or more efficient remote work, as we've experienced during the pandemic. So all that to say and to conclude, because I'm running out of time, the need and the appetite for a humane, socially responsible, and ecological perspective on digital transformation is really high. And as a consequence, this should be a prominent concern when we examine the business opportunities and the business challenges that are associated with the design and the diffusion of digital innovations. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for listening. I will talk my talk now and maybe have the opportunity to take a few questions and comments. Thank you. It's an excellent question, and I think the answer from a chief digital transformation officer would be people. They are the key enablers, and they can also represent key barriers because it's tougher to change people, to change how people communicate, to change how people work, to change how they coordinate, to change the culture, and culture is people. So going back to the La Presse case study, building the technology is one thing. You can hire a bunch of engineers and have, very good methods to develop the technology, be agile, and, develop a very good product. But, if your journalists, your editors, your graphists do not use the technology, if they're resistant, then you're not going to go anywhere. So it's even more costly and time consuming to get the people on board, to get the people aligned with the strategic vision, and to get the ball rolling somehow with your people. It's not a technology thing; it's a people thing. When it's people, but I mean people. When I say people, that we can. There are many layers to that. And it's not just people, let's say, workers. We can go back up in the organization and look at top executives, leadership, vision. In the La Presse case, what stood up really was that there was such a strong leadership from the chief digital officer and the chief editor. Everybody was on board, but there was a really strong leadership and vision to really try to build a new experience on the tablet. So, there is top leadership and the vision. There is the culture, building the culture and, diffusing the new culture or the culture changes through the organization. Some organizations say we need to be more data-centric. Well, think of a media. It's so difficult, for journalists to think about being data-driven. Journalists their mission is not to be data-driven. Their mission is to investigate the truth and to report what's relevant for society. So in another case, I've been writing this year in another media, we look actually at the change of culture, and especially with journalists, and it's very difficult and it takes a lot of time. But you need to, get people on board to this change of culture if you want really to implement the change in your business model and implement your strategic vision. So, that would be the second one, maybe culture. So there's strategic or top executive leadership, culture changes, and perhaps at the end there is still a little bit of a literacy, digital literacy issue. It's very tough to keep track of what's going on. There is a lot of fake information, or we see, AI can do this, blockchain can do that, but there are scams. There are tech companies that try to diffuse your product and get us to get into the AI bandwagon, but it's difficult to build the capability to be able to scan the technology environment, with a good systematic eye, and to pick the technological enablers that will really benefit your context and your organizations, not just being similar to everyone and say, yeah, we use AI in our organization. So, the ability to really have thoughtful reflection and to have the literacy, to have the ability to incorporate a good technology watch is another factor, I think. Each industry has its challenges. I talked a lot about the media industry. Education is by no means, is also vulnerable to digital transformations. And maybe similar to the financial crisis of 2008 for the media industry, the COVID crisis really pushed us very badly to change our habits and to experiment. And if you are in a university setting, if you're a faculty or an administrator, you know that it takes time for our processes, pedagogical processes, administrative processes to change. We're not different from other organizations. We are resistant to change. Even us in the IT department in my university, often we're reluctant to changes and to the incorporation of new technologies. So I don't know where we're going, but what is for sure is that the COVID-19 has changed the game. We have incorporated a lot of hybrid training and virtual training, not for all our programs here at HSC, for example, because there are undergrads, for example, love to be here and want to be here and meet people and be on site. But we are opening our sites and we are experimenting, but we don't know really. We are really trying to test out some technologies, and we are aware of what's going on. But where is higher education going in 5 years? I think is a question I can be very specific about in my answer. But the question is really good. Sorry, can you repeat the beginning? What are the factors that?
Sure. What do you think are the main factors to accelerate digital transformation in non-developed countries like Peru and many others in Latin America?
That's a very good question too. So, I want to be cautious because I don't know the context of Peru and Latin America very well. Okay, so I think that would be ambitious and not very fair for me to provide very clear and definite answer on that. There are so many parts in the equation, and again, looking at the canvas, there is technological progress is here, but how is it leveraged by innovators and how is it adopted by consumers? So, it's where the barriers may be or the accelerating factors may be. Okay, do we have the infrastructure, let's say the entrepreneurial infrastructures to help technology go from progress to product innovation or to process innovation or to business model innovation? Do we have the entrepreneurial support in the country to do that? For the adoption, do we have, how is the population connected? How are they using the devices? What are the factors that could increase those figures if it is where it's low? Then you can move on to the organizations. Are they equipped? Can they recruit staff or executive that have the knowledge to incorporate, to scan the innovation and to incorporate the innovation? So I think, what I like about the Canva is that, it pushes you to ask you the tough questions. And, you can use it in any industry, you can use it in any context. And I think the question, the answers would be different. But again, it's tough for me to answer specifically because I'm not knowledgeable enough about the context. Yeah. Again, there are so many ingredients, but I think one that comes back when you look at episodes, of digital transformation in different industries and different organizations is the agility. that those organizations need to build. Going back to the La Presse case, it's okay, you launch yourself in a project, you're going to develop this new product and change your business model, and you do it, and you transition, and then what? And then it's not over. But what you build is the agility of being able to reproduce that, better in a shorter time, and maybe making even better and better decisions, So I think agility is a very important organizational capability, and the ability to move as quickly as fast as possible, because speed is a very important factor, for survival. In the case of La Presse, again, in the media industry, so many other daily newspapers, it was too late. They just died in those years. And it was important to, start on time, but to build the capability to be agile and to reproduce, other episodes of digital transformation.